Okay, welcome to the Close to Home podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, I am super excited that we have Tatiana Tsoir with us, my personal and business accountant and business finance guru, I should say. Welcome, Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Good to be here. Thanks
How
for
are you
inviting.
today?
Doing great. Doing great. Busy.
Good. Yeah. We're right in the middle of tax season. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to our listeners and give them some good advice. I'm super
Sure.
excited. Yeah, I'm super excited today because we are going to talk about all about managing your finances for a small business. This is something that I really had to learn and you had to help me a lot with. So I'm excited to share this with all of our listeners who are either thinking about starting their own small business or are in the first stages of starting their small business, and how to really think about approaching some of these really difficult issues that they'll have to tackle with their finances. But before we get into it, let's hear a little bit about who are you, where do you live, what do you do, who are the types of people that you help?
My name is Tatiana Tsoir, and I'm based out of the suburb in New York. I work with primarily small businesses, those who are just starting out, but more with those who are in business and need help kind of managing and growing their business, stabilizing their cash flow, proactively reducing taxes for them. So kind of an overall support. I would even call it a holistic approach. And what that really means is I basically help folks like you manage all things accounting, taxes, and bookkeeping.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, how many clients do you typically work with at a time? What is sort of like your intro to those clients? Like, who should approach you if they're starting their small business or thinking about it?
Well, so I currently, because of the way I set up my practice, I do a lot of work myself because I like to have hands-on approach. I like to know and understand what's going on in a business. I'm only able to take a limited number of clients. So typically I work with, right now I'm working with about 120 clients, and not all of them are tax clients. Some of them are just exactly what I've mentioned, what we've just discussed, people who need help um, kind of with the business management, growing, tax reduction, but there are others who are just tax compliance, so just filing forms, every year and all of those things. But in order to bridge the gap to make my expertise available to everyone else, I'm actually launching a book next year that will cover specifically things that someone who's starting a new business or is thinking about starting a new business, has a business idea, can use as a how-to guide, basically.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. And I'm excited to tell people also at the end about that book and where they can get it, when to expect it, all of that good stuff. So essentially, you do all of the stuff that, well, speaking personally, me as a business owner, I don't want to do, or I might
That's
not be
right.
the best at. So you take all of that off my plate, which is really awesome, and much appreciated. Then, like I mentioned, so what we're going to talk about today is for those people who might be thinking about starting a small business or who have just started one, and really how they should think about managing their finances. So, just to start off, can you tell us sort of like what your top three recommendations are that come to mind when someone is a novice at managing business finances and their taxes?
Sure. So there are obviously a number of things that you, as a business owner, should look at. But my top three, I would say, is separation of business and personal income and expenses. So, in order to give yourself some space to give yourself an opportunity to not go crazy during tax time, trying to assemble expenses and etc., it makes sense also from an audit perspective to separate your expenses for your business and create, I don't know, a separate bank account If it's under your name, then just a separate bank account where you would run only the business income and expenses. Same thing for the credit cards. If you have to use a personal credit card because you need to prepay certain things, you can use a personal card, but just make sure there are no other personal charges on it. The second one would be the value of good bookkeeping. Now, you can do it yourself if you want to do it well. You should get some knowledge, and you can save money by doing it yourself, or you can hire a good bookkeeper. So the value of good bookkeeping is such that if you double count income, so I'm going to illustrate it for you a little bit. If you double count income, you will overpay tax. So you don't want that. Same thing with the expenses. If you double count expenses, you will underpay tax, and then you will get in trouble if you get audited. So another, I guess, opportunity is to underreport expenses and overpay tax. So all of these scenarios are happening every day for all small business owners. And the way you get around them, the way you deal with them, is actually having a good bookkeeping system in place. That bookkeeping system can also provide you value kind of down the road, and you can run reports and do analytics on your business, and that alone will help you grow as well. Number three, I would say, is the rhythm. So regardless of who's doing the bookkeeping, if you're doing the bookkeeping, you need a rhythm, a routine. Just like children thrive in routine, adults thrive as well. So a weekly routine of looking at your reports for last period, whether it's a week or a month or whatever. Look at your numbers. Most likely in the beginning, you won't necessarily understand everything that you see, but a simple P&L, profit and loss report, or a balance sheet from your accounting system would be enough for you to look at on a regular basis. As time goes on and you ask questions, whether you do it yourself and you do some research online, or someone does it for you and you ask them questions about the numbers, you will learn and you will be more familiar with your own business, the back end of it. And that is tremendous that gives you tremendous power to really manage your business well, to not be afraid. This will enable you to get clarity and confidence in your business day to day.
Yeah, totally. I love you say that because we all are really just children. We all need a rhythm. I know that was a huge thing for me, was getting in the rhythm. And we've talked about this before. You might not know what you're looking at when you first start looking, but the more you actually look at it and discipline yourself to look at it every week, the more familiar you will become with what you're looking at and what you need to know.
Absolutely.
So getting in the rhythm, separating personal and business, this can be hard for people, I think, because you might need more credit than your business currently has available. For example, you might need a higher limit on a card. And so it can be really difficult to try to keep your business and personal expenses separate. Do you recommend that people take out a business credit card only, maybe under their personal name, but they use it just for business?
If you need it, I mean, if you can manage without credit, that's ideal. But if you're just starting out, you most likely will need some sort of an investment, whether it's a coach, whether it's a brick and mortar store, rent, or just investment in licensing or permits or whatever it may be. You may need some initial capital, and you may not have it right away. So I do kind of encourage folks to have a business credit card just in case, or personal that's devoted for a business. But I'm kind of conservative when it comes to using that credit. So I only, we'll talk about that later, but I only kind of, I don't want to say approve, but I will only encourage usage of credit card if you can afford to pay the expenses off at the end of the month.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Pay that debt off later. And then you mentioned bookkeeping and learning about bookkeeping. Where do you recommend that people go to start out? Like, should they watch YouTube videos? Is there any online resources? What's the best way for someone who's brand new at this and probably doesn't even know what bookkeeping is to learn about that?
So there are a couple of resources. If you want to do it yourself, which you can for a number of years until you grow to be in a position to hire a bookkeeper or just outsource the service. And basically, there are software options that make it fairly simple to do your own bookkeeping. However, it's only simple on the surface. So you need to learn a little bit more about it, because usually what happens is people start uh, doing it themselves, and then they create um, chaos that cannot be reconciled, and they have to hire someone to fix it, to clean it up, and they have to pay a lot of money to get that done. So in order to avoid that, what I would recommend is, first of all, get a good software system. So whether it's a QuickBooks Online, which is my preferred method of managing a small business, it's a robust system that can scale and can grow with you. But there are also others like Zero, Sage, and a couple of other options. But basically, getting that system, you can start with a more simple version, and then getting a little bit of a training in terms of how to set up accounts, what kind of accounts there are. Accounts are also known as categories. So what kind of categories there are, what are the types of categories, because that's also important. That shows up in different places on a financial statement that you would then review every week, for example. So that's kind of important. So I'm launching a couple of things to bridge that gap to help folks learn that. So in May, I have a training coming out that's called Do Your Own Books Masterclass, where I will teach specifically that, because I feel it's so important. The value of bookkeeping is so high, a good bookkeeping is so high that it's important for someone who's doing it themselves to save money, to not end up paying $3, $4, $5,000 for a cleanup after they've kind of tried it on their own and messed it up. That's not always the case, but because of folks' lack of understanding of the types of accounts, the types of categories that go in the financial statements, that's where the problems usually happen. And it's fairly easy to learn how to do it on your own with my training.
And why are those categories so important? Are those what are being reported to the IRS when you're filing your taxes, or what makes the categorization super important for people?
So typically, the debit and credit system is based on the type of account. So for example, income account is typically on a credit side. So whenever you set up an account that's your, I don't know, commission revenue or whatever it is, the normal balance for it will be credit. Like, I know that it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but just bear with me. So there are accounts that have normal balances. You don't want to see a profit and loss statement with a lot of negatives, because when it's negative, it usually means that it's the wrong type of account. If an expense is negative, that usually means it's income. So it shouldn't have been an expense category type to begin with. Same thing, if income is negative, it means it's an expense, which should have been set up as an expense. Now, there are also temporary and permanent accounts. So I'll give you an example that would probably help you understand what that means, and the audience understand what that means. So when you are renting out an apartment, for example, people pay you rent, but before they move in, they give you a security deposit. Now, that security deposit is not income because you will have to pay it back. So that's a permanent account. It goes on your balance sheet, and the type of category is going to be a liability. So you owe that money back to the person. Now, that is the type of permanent account. The rental income is a temporary account, because every year, every period, let's say a month, 3 months, a year, you will have those income and expense numbers for that period only. Then if you change the period, your numbers will change. Now, balance sheet or permanent accounts, they keep accumulating balance forever until you make some sort of I don't know, you pay it back, or you do whatever, something to kind of give it back to the to your tenant or whatever happens, that's when you return the money, and that no longer is an expense. It's just a reduction in that account that was holding placeholder for the tenant security deposit. So that's why those category types are so important, is because they go into different places on the statements that you would look at. And if they're negative, or if they are overstated or understated, they won't make sense to you. So I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, they won't make sense to you, but they also will not be reported correctly to save you the most in your taxes, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
do whatever your tax strategy might be
Yeah.
to
Absolutely.
execute on that. Yeah, that
That's
makes sense. So
that,
even beyond maybe your understanding, and certainly beyond my understanding, but more importantly, it will not be the best scenario for you, basically, depending on your tax strategy, if you don't know the correct categorization or categories that you're supposed to be filing, and those numbers that go into them.
well, and going back to my example just now, so let's say you just expense that tenant security deposit. You may use listed as an expense and you never picked it up as income before. It's going to be a problem up on audit. But at the same time, if you don't pick it up at income and don't expense it when you pay it back, that's going to be no problem for the IRS. So that's why it's, it's kind of important to get those types done correctly.
Yeah, yeah. So learning to how to do bookkeeping and keeping the books correctly is super important. I also wanted to mention, not all we're talking a lot about doing it yourself versus hiring someone to do it. But even when you hire someone to do it, not all people you hire are created equal. So they will not all manage your books necessarily the way that you need them to be or have the correct strategy. And I went through this where I think the accountant I worked with prior to you did not really understand my business or what I was trying to accomplish. And therefore, the tax strategy was not set the way that I wanted it to be. And so I think that it's important for people to hear as well that you may be hiring someone to manage your books and take that off of your plate, but you should be really careful about who that is and understand if their strategy and what they're doing for you actually aligns to what you want to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have processes in place to kind of educate um, possible business owners and current business owners to get there. In my book, I will have a chapter on questions to ask when you interview an accountant, kind of how to find a good one, like what answers to look for, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's great. That'll be super helpful, I think, for a lot of people, especially what to look for, what questions to ask. Um, so what small business owners think a lot about what happens in the worst case scenario. They want to take the leap of faith and start their business, but how can they prepare for the worst case scenario? And whether that is the business goes into debt or the business has a huge tax bill at the end of one year, what are some ways that they can really make sure to prepare themselves for those scenarios and avoid them possibly?
Well, every business and every really, and even a full-time job is susceptible to risk. So now we actually have an unprecedented situation with the coronavirus where the landscape of the businesses will change, fortunately or unfortunately. And that could be kind of a worst case scenario example. Um, my clients, many of them are concerned about the future. Many of them are concerned about their business, their employees, how to handle this. And my advice is don't fake it till you make it, face it till you make it. So take a breath, look at your numbers, give your brain the ability and the time and the space to come up with the solution. Look at the possible scenarios, several scenarios. If we stop selling, what happens? What other costs do we have to pay? What other assets do we have to sell off and generate some cash? Cash is important. It's probably the most important thing. I mean, and they teach us in accounting that cash is king, and it's absolutely true. So
Yep.
um, I would recommend using Profit First. Profit First is a great system for every business owner. It ensures that you have reserves. It doesn't mean that you are not prone to a risk of this situation that we were experiencing or experience. It can be a different virus, a different scenario, but it just means that you will have time that you need to make decisions without rushing into them
Yeah,
out of fear.
totally. So, using profit first, facing it instead of faking it until you make it, and just really understanding what you need to have in place if there is a bad scenario. Absolutely. Great. And so tell us a little bit about more about your book. When's it coming out? Where can people find you? And how can they get in contact with you?
Sure. So the book is Dream Bold, Start Smart. It's going to be published in probably March or April of 2021. However, it's going to be available for pre order probably within the next month. So you can sign up for announcements at my website, tatianatsoir.com. At the bottom, there is a form to sign up for to follow us, to follow me. And then we'll announce as soon as the book is available for pre-order. The book is ideally for someone who's either stuck at a job and wants always wanted to start a business, and it's also for someone who just haven't been working or following their passion and want to follow their passion and start something that they really like, but are afraid of losing money. They can't afford to lose money. So I'll provide a plan, a guide for those folks to really have the back office in order before they even begin. So it's an ability for people to bulletproof their dream, which is amazing. Besides the book, I'm also launching some trainings, like I mentioned, to do your own books, to do your own bookkeeping. And also, I will be training bookkeepers to do bookkeeping better so that they can serve you better as well.
Awesome. Great. And how can people find your trainings and reach out to you?
So, if you sign up for announcements, you will get an announcement once the training is available. Right now, I'm collecting folks for the wait list for the Do Your Own Books Masterclass. And soon we'll be collecting the same for the bookkeeping training. So, anyone who wants to kind of have extra cash, learn how to do bookkeeping well, be a bookkeeper while doing something else and pursuing something else to keep the bills paid and everything. They can learn and become a bookkeeper, and they'll be able to be a good one, a really good one. So all of that is available on my website, tatianatsoir.com. You can sign up, follow, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. That sounds great. And we'll link to that in the show notes as well. So everyone can go find you and sign up for those classes and pre order your book. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining today. Hopefully, this was helpful to all those people out there who are thinking about or in the first stages of starting their own business and wondering, how the heck do I manage my finances? And what should I be thinking about as I take this journey to manage my own business finances? So, thanks so much for joining me, Tatiana, and we will see you all later.